Well, Evan, thanks so much for being on the show today. I want to start with this. What was the final straw that pushed you to make the leap to start Canyon Pickleball?
It's a great question, and it's a question that I get asked quite a bit from people. But for me, the final straw was honestly, I have been playing pickleball for about 2.5 years, and for me, just the journey of getting into pickleball, I just wanted to start to share that passion. And
Mm.
quite honestly, it was never the goal to really make much money. It was just to be able to put my all into something. So that was ultimately kind of the biggest driver. Was it was kind of like the snowball was being pushed up the mountain, and then eventually like the excitement around pickleball just boiled over, and I was like, you know what, I should build my own brand around this.
So, okay, so I got to ask this. I know like people that have like a more entrepreneurial spirit, maybe grew up wanting to start businesses. Oftentimes people don't know like what they're going to start. They just know they want to
Hmm.
start something. However, I feel like it's probably pretty weird, or weird's not the right word, pretty not normal to
Hmm.
get interested in something that you really didn't know much about, and then in 2.5 years start a business like in that same thing. You
Yeah.
know, so I don't know. That's like, well, let's start with this, and then we'll kind of dive into that. For those that are
Sure.
not totally familiar, I know pickleball is like really like leaping off. A lot of people are heard about it. Maybe people
Mhm.
haven't played it, but what is pickleball?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. And our primary audience is people who have potentially never heard of pickleball. So this is
Yeah.
this is a lot of my job is educating people on what pickleball is. Pickleball is a combination of, I like to say, tennis, ping pong, racquetball, kind of all mixed into one. You can think about a pickleball court. It looks like a shrunken tennis court.
Mm.
And then you can think about some of the gear and everything similar to like, a racquetball, where you've got a ball, you've got a paddle. It's a flat surface paddle like a racket that you would have in racquetball. And then, it's also going to be a court that's going to be a similar feel to like a tennis court. So there's a lot of different kind of rules within it. There's things that make pickleball a little more unique, but you're playing with what ultimately looks like a wiffle ball. And so it's funny because it does look a little ridiculous when you first see it. You see the paddle, you see the ball, and it's honestly it's kind of funny. I laughed the first time I saw it too, and so that's a big piece of pickleball, which is like the fun atmosphere about it. So yeah, that's a little bit about kind of what the sport is.
Now, did you like growing up? Did you always kind of want to start a business, or like how did this idea start for you?
Yeah, so for me, I've always kind of had that itch to get into business in some capacity. I got my degree in business. My dad was in business, but no one in my family had really started a business. We had kind of gone down the typical corporate path. And I always knew that I wanted to try to build something, but I wasn't really sure what it would be. Like a lot of people, I have a lot of ideas. I have a
Mm.
notes app that I'm literally jotting down ideas all the time. And I've always been kind of looking for what is something that I could really throw my all into. And quite honestly, I never found anything that got me as excited as pickleball did.
Mm.
And yeah, so I've always kind of had that itch that I wanted to scratch. I just wasn't sure what was going to be the right opportunity.
So you said about 2.5 years is when you first started playing pickleball.
Correct.
How long from first started playing to I might want to do something more with this?
It's funny. I guess I started 2.5 years ago. So at around January of this year is when it kind of started the idea that I might want to start something. So I guess yeah, about 2 years before I actually jumped into the idea about it.
Okay, so you went from like playing to dreaming to kind of going for it, like all like really quick.
Yeah.
Um, so this is, I mean, as we're recording this, you're 9, 10 months in,
Hmm.
so still trying to figure things out. What was, or I guess because it's still pretty new, what still might be Plan B for you and your family if things don't go well or as planned
Yeah.
or as you hope with Canyon Pickleball?
Yeah, it's funny. So as of right now, Canon is not paying the bills. So I do, I do have some other things I work on the side,
Okay,
and so it is one of those things where Canyon is sustainable. We're at a position
great.
where we're not having to put really much money back into the company. Everything we make, we just can put right back in. We don't have to put any of new investment in. So that's great. But it's not paying the bills. So
Yeah.
I do have kind of side projects that I work on the side. So my background is as a copywriter. So I'm a
Hmm.
marketing expert. I've been writing copy for a couple of years now, and it's actually how I linked up with my co-founder. He's a copywriter as well. So I do copyright on the side. I also do some sales consulting on the side. So between all of those businesses is kind of help what pays the bills. Ultimately, as far as a plan B goes, there really isn't much of a plan B of me getting back into the corporate world. My plan B is to continue to do and build out other side businesses that I'm working on. So I have no plan to go back into the corporate world.
So, what led to? I mean, obviously, Canyon Pickleball doing it. Let's talk about maybe the transition out of the normal corporate world 9 to 5. When did
Sure,
that happen, and how did
sure.
you kind of figure out, where the money was going to come from as you built this
Yeah,
up?
yeah, it's a great question, and it happened about it was April April of 2020, what, three, right? We're in 2024. Yeah. So April of last year, my daughter was born in November of 2022. And when she was born, I always kind of knew that I wanted to make a change, but I wasn't really sure when and how. I'd been in the corporate world for about 10 years up until that point, normal 8 to 5, worked at startups, tech companies, that kind of thing. And when my daughter was born in November, I was on paternity leave for about 3 months, and there
Mm.
was kind of a shift in my brain where I realized that I wanted to be around for her more. I wanted to be more involved in her life. I wanted to really be able to be connected to her in a way that a lot of fathers just haven't been able to with the normal kind of setup for kind of the 8 to 5 life. And so while I was on paternity, I started learning more about kind of other things that were interesting to me, copywriting being a big piece.
Mm.
And when I came back from paternity leave, I did something that I don't really recommend to people, which was I worked for about 2 weeks and I tried to make it work. And then it kind of boiled over for me, and I put in my 2 week notice and I decided to go full time freelance.
Okay.
And it was a big, big shift, but it was scary for a couple months. But yeah, so I would say my daughter was the catalyst. And again, I don't recommend people necessarily do that, but that is
Right.
something that I decided to do.
So some people might be wondering, startup life, entrepreneur, especially in the beginning of a company, that's a lot of hours.
It is.
So saying, hey, I want to have more flexibility with my family, but yet now doing something that's going to require a lot in the beginning. What does it look like for you to kind of balance, working hard, doing some stuff that maybe not be sustainable forever to get this thing off the ground, but also trying to be there for your family?
Yeah, it's great. For me, I would say flexibility is the ability to
Mm.
decide what I prioritize. Right? It's creating priorities that are my priorities. So it's understanding that if the priority that I need to get taken care of, I can do at 8 p.m. at night. I'll do that, but then I can pick up my daughter at 3:30 from daycare.
Yeah.
It's knowing that okay, maybe my daughter's sick, and so my wife and I are going to split time taking care of her at home. So I know that I'm going to get up early that morning. I'm going to work from 6 a.m. until 12, and then I'm going to take over, watching her from 12 until my wife is done working. So it's being able to create my own priorities. So even if the hours, I'll be honest, like you said, the hours are more than I was working at a normal corporate job. You can kind of clock out, you're done at 5, you're able to not think about it, but the ability to actually create my own priorities and my own schedule, the true flexibility with that, knowing that as long as I get my work done, I can do literally anything I need to in my day,
Mm.
that is worth so much more.
Yeah. How have you, I'm sure, 9, 10 months into this thing, have adjusted it? What are some maybe principles? And I know this is maybe different based on someone's season of life, kids, family, that sort of thing. But like, what are some things that you found to be helpful to help you kind of create a schedule that works for you and your family?
Yeah. So for me, I'm a big believer in putting everything into calendar.
Mm.
I put everything into my calendars, every single thing from planning when I'm going to work out to when I'm going to go for a run to when I'm going to take a lunch. I am very active in my calendar, and I live and die by it,
Mm.
knowing that this is kind of my schedule. At the end of the day, things change, things come up. Sometimes you get a call at 1 p.m. that your
Right.
daughter's sick and you need to come pick her up, so you make plans to change things. But for me, it's always been about just being really structured and organized, and that was a hard piece to kind of roll into because no one's really training you to think that way, right? You've been kind of conditioned
Right.
to work that normal 8 to 5, and it's much easier to kind of go into that flow. So once you're kind of on your own, you're freelancing, you're building something up, it really is on you. And there is a lot of uh, like terrifying feelings that come with that. And so, it's really about being organized. It's about finding the system that works for you. I honestly, when I started chatting with other freelancers, other entrepreneurs to learn what they were doing, and then grabbing pieces of that to be able to see what would work best for me. And ultimately, it's just about trying out what works best for you.
Yeah. So I'm with you, calendaring out your day, allotting your time, telling it where to go. It's also helpful too, especially in maybe more knowledge work, trying to figure things out. Sometimes at the end of the day, you can be like, what did I do? And
Yeah.
having to be like, here's exactly what I did that day. I'm curious, maybe, how does that look like for you? So do you like on a Sunday calendar out your week? Is it like the day before? How do you kind of fill it out, as the days go by?
Sure. So I usually exactly that on a Sunday is typically when I kind of calendar out my week. I see what's coming up, see what I have planned. I also for quite a long time, I don't do it as much anymore, but I used to use an app. I want to say it was called Tracker, and I tracked everything I did, every single thing I did. As soon as I started a task, I started that clock, and then I categorized every single project. So I knew when I was in therapy, I knew when I was on a run, I knew every single thing. So that at the end of the week, I could see what I actually did. And so I did that for a good 6 to probably 10 months to really see where I was spending my time. And I started realizing that, okay, I was not, for instance, playing guitar. You see my guitars back there. I wasn't playing guitar ever. I maybe wasn't going for walks. I wasn't, getting up from my desk as much. I could see the things that I needed to change. So I always recommend when you're first starting out, kind of tracking your time to see where you actually are spending your time, because you'll be surprised what
Yeah.
you are doing more of and maybe what you're not doing enough of.
Yeah. That's great. Now, so going back to pickleball, it's kind of
Yeah,
exploding. I
sure.
feel like maybe it's kind of like one of those things where, if people could go back in time, they'd invest in Coca-Cola or Apple or Microsoft or whatever.
Sure.
So we're on the beginning of the thing. So it's kind of like there's a lot of opportunity, but there's also a lot of competition because people
Hmm.
are trying to like jump in on this thing. How do you, and this could be pickleball or just in general, but how do you build this thing from scratch without customers, without brand awareness, plus the fact of like a lot of people are trying to get in as it's really
Yeah.
growing? How's it
Yeah.
been for you?
Scary. It's been a lot of emotions. I would say you're not building something that you care about unless you're scared at least every other day. And for us, I would say fortunately, because we both have a really strong marketing background, we
Right.
went into it kind of knowing a little more than probably the average person going into building a business. We're copywriters, so we are messengers at heart, so we know how to write good messaging. Um, the biggest piece I would say for us is understanding when you're starting a business, especially in a competitive space, understanding what your differentiators are and who the audience you're trying to go after, and just
Mm.
absorbing everything you can about them, knowing every single piece about what they're going through, who they are, the interest they have. And when you do that, you can obviously take little pieces from successful brands that are in your space, but then you can really start to customize what your offer is, what your approach is going to be for them. So for us, and with Canyon specifically, we started to really find gaps in the market for
Mm.
where current pickleball companies were lacking, and so we started to really pick up on that. So it has been a challenge. It hasn't been easy. We're still trying to acquire customers, and we're still trying to get that customer acquisition cost down. But at the end of the day, we know we've got a really unique product and a really unique
Yeah.
company.
So again, I'm sure that the marketing background, all these things are really helpful. Kind of maybe finding a hole in the market. Where would you say that has been for you? Like, what is the
Sure.
area you guys are trying to get at? You think other people
Sure.
might be missing?
Yeah. So I'll kind of give you honestly the quick elevator pitch for Canon because I think it
Yeah.
helps answer that. So our gap in the market is affordable paddles that have premium quality, that also help you give back. And so we really when we started Canon, we knew we wanted to figure out a system for people to be able to continue doing what they would normally do, which is maybe getting into pickleball, trying it out, but be able to give back. So we are mission driven. We donate to the National Park Foundation. All of our designs are based off of natural landscapes. So we are really, really involved in that. We use fully sustainable packaging for all of our paddle shipments as well, which is something that, quite frankly, not really, I don't think any pickleball brands are doing right now. It's a lot of plastic. They're using a lot of styrofoam, all that kind of stuff. We use fully sustainable packaging for all of our material. And then the paddles themselves, again, are all inspired by natural landscapes. Now, we also decided at a very early stage to not take as much profit, which was a big risk, to be
Mm.
honest with you. Our paddles as they sit right now, they're premium quality. They're quality that you would get in a more high end paddle. But we really wanted people to be able to get into the sport. And so for us, we decided to take less profit, knowing that we could charge more, but we really want people to be able to get into the sport at a reasonable price. So
Yeah.
between all those things, that was really our biggest differentiator.
And how have you gone from this idea? When I start a
Mhm.
business, pickleball, paddle boards. I mean, these are like physical products. You got to
Yeah,
find a place to make them, ship them,
sure.
whatever. So how did you go from, hey, I'm going to start this thing to like actually getting the physical product in your garage, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, yeah,
But how
yeah.
did you go from an idea to an actual concept that you're selling?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question, and it's honestly something that, I mean, again, as a marketer, I have that background, but I had no experience sourcing the product. Again,
Yeah.
like packaging, manufacturing, all of that. Honestly, the answer is YouTube and Google. It is just Googling and YouTube videos, learning from people that have been there before, and so it's listening to podcasts. It's reaching out to people that have been building brands in the e-commerce space that have been building within other sports. And it's honestly just trying to soak up as much information as possible. I mean, I cannot tell you how many Google searches and just YouTube videos we have digested to learn how to source product effectively, how to make sure you're choosing the right manufacturer, how to choose a packaging partner, understanding shipping, like understanding all of those pieces is just from just absorbing information everywhere and anywhere. So that alone, I would say, took probably. I mean, we didn't officially launch the paddles on our site until July 4th. So we
Okay.
started the idea in January. We didn't actually launch until July 4th. So from that period of time, we were just basically learning in learning mode and gathering mode the entire
So you have an idea, then you have a product. You also have to fund it.
time.
So
Mm-hmm.
what's that like for you guys? Is it how are you getting the capital to start this thing?
Yeah, so this has all been bootstrapped just from my
Wow.
partner and I. So my partner, based up in New York, we both have basically been wanting to start a business for years. We've both had the itch for a while. We both have had kind of funding set aside for future businesses that we might want to get into. And so this has all been bootstrapped from each of us. I would say sometimes a little bit to a fault. We've been frugal.
Mm.
We could scale faster if we decided to kind of open the wallet a little more, but we've been able to luckily do a lot of this ourselves. We built the website ourselves, a lot of the pieces that we just learned how to do ourselves. But we are now at a point where we are scaling quite a bit. So we are having to kind of open up the wallets a little more. But yeah, this has been fully funded by us from our previous corporate roles and just kind of from our savings.
So will we find you or see you guys on Shark Tank?
So it's actually really funny because I I've been wondering when if a pickleball brand will end up on Shark Tank, and my thought is no. And the reason I say no is because the successful pickleball companies, and I'd like to put us in that category, the successful pickleball companies are doing very well. They quite honestly don't probably need investors. They probably don't need much funding because they're able to have good margins and they're able to be able to put back in the business. Um, I honestly don't know if I will see. I mean, there's a couple of the big guys out there that I could name, but I honestly don't know if I'll see them on there. So to answer your question though, it's funny. I have always wanted to be on Shark Tank, mainly because I've been a big fan. I've watched every episode. So I don't know. We'll see one day if we ever
Yeah.
go out for external funding.
Well, speaking of being successful, you guys been using a lot of social media to promote your
Mm-hmm.
product. Obviously, with your background, your website looks like super great.
Thanks.
Um, and but and even like on some of your social media videos, like you share the story of your company, kind of the background, so that that's kind of cool. Um, how do you decide like what to share and how much time you spend on it each week? Because with the tracking, I mean, creating videos takes more time than people think who don't create them. It's not just like you turn on and film whatever. So how
Yep.
do you figure out that balance between like, yeah, doing all that stuff and working on other parts of the business?
Whew, that's a great question because it is that could not be more true what you said, which is I completely underestimated the amount of time it takes to film content, to plan content, script it, edit it, all of that. We actually an update very recently over the last 2 weeks, we actually hired a social media agency to help create content. So we are now kind of outsourcing some of that to help, which is going to be a big, big lift because now we are able to provide more attention in other areas of the business. But
Yeah.
furthermore, we're able to now provide our ideas to, quite frankly, people that just have a little more experience. We know how to edit and get things up quicker. We just have not been able to keep up with that pace of creating content. But to answer your question, balancing that time has been tough. Usually the day before, I schedule my posts out. But even then, trying to hop on trends, trying to hop on things
Yeah.
that are going on, especially across multiple platforms, we're having to create videos and splice them down for TikTok and Facebook and everything else. Like it is exhausting. And I would say that's an area of the business where we want to ensure that we're being really thoughtful about what we post. We don't want to just
Yeah.
post content for content's sake. And so that's a big reason why we brought on this agency, which is we have a hand in all of the pieces and they can make things come to life faster than we would be able to at a higher quality. So
Yeah.
that is going to be a big piece of our business, being able to operate more efficiently.
I think too, building this, e-commerce, if everything's online, no physical store. I think some people might assume, well, as long as you have a good looking website, do the social media, that's like the main thing, and then you'll attract customers. What would you say to that assumption? People might assume for me to start a business, I just need to look good online, then it'll work out for me.
I would say that is rarely the case. And it's an area that we kind of fell into a little bit of a trap early on, which was iterating little pieces of, that idea of look legit, right?
Yeah.
How legit can we look? Ultimately, people will buy from brands that they really connect with and from products they really connect with. The look legit part, you can only get so far before you're starting to, split hairs and change
Yeah.
things. So that is a big piece that we kind of fell into a trap early on, which was tweaking this little piece or changing the font this way or the color this way or the image on the website. Like there was all these little things that would maybe be incremental changes, but ultimately, it's do you have a good offer? Are you connecting with your audience? And are you building a community? And
Yeah.
so if you're doing those three things, then people are going to come to you,
Yeah.
even if your site or that experience is just like a little bit maybe less than what you wish it could be at this point.
Yeah. How'd you get the name?
Yeah, so it's funny. I in leading up to this interview, I was going back from text messages, and because I have always been I lived in Colorado for 5.5 years. I live in Florida right now. My family and I are moving back to Colorado in the spring, but the outdoors has been a big piece of our lives for a while. We've really been connected to getting outside, camping, hiking, all of that. And I looked back in my text messages with my co-founder, and we were thinking about names and I was thinking about being outside, and we had gone to a trip in Utah, and we went to a bunch of the national parks, and somehow Canyon just popped in my brain. I honestly have no idea how. And I was like, "What about Canyon?" And he was like, "Yeah, I kind of like that." And I asked my wife, and she was all about it. So it honestly happened very naturally, and
Yeah.
but I would say the name stuck mainly because we wanted something short, we wanted something simple, short syllables, and it's easily rememberable and easy to say.
So speaking of your co-founder, I mean, you kind of the brainchild. You really want to start this, but then you connected with the co-founder to get off the ground. So how did that work
Mm-hmm.
out, and how did you get him on board?
Yeah. So when I first met him, it was probably the last summer, I think. So it was summer of 2023, and we had got connected through this mastermind that we were a part of within the marketing community. And he had messaged me because we had been, we're similar age, we kind of similar personalities, and he had messaged me just randomly and said, "Hey, have you ever wanted to start a business?" And I was like, definitely. I definitely have. And so we're just kind of chatting, getting to know each other a little bit. And then in December of last year, going into January of this year, he reached back out to me, and then I believe it was me that then said, "Hey, do you want to like just chat every couple of weeks and let's just like shoot some ideas out. Let's just like chat and open up the dialogue." And ultimately, that was what led to realizing that we wanted to do a business together. Was just chatting every other week, starting in around November, December timeframe. So I've always encouraged that to, I would say, most people I speak to, because whether you're going to start something or you're just going to be able to build a great new connection with someone, being able to spitball just open ideas and have a very vulnerable, safe space to do that, it's really, really fun. And it's hard to find people that, maybe want to take things to creation and implementation, but being able to spitball those ideas was just a blast, and it led to Canyon.
Yeah. What has been one of the biggest challenges that you have faced so far that you did not anticipate?
Yeah. So the biggest challenge was there was two. I'll say one of them first, but when we initially sourced our paddles, we had them show up, and on our paddles we have this kind of custom little rubber loop that goes on the handle, and it has a saying that we say. It says "Explore more." That's kind of our phrase, "Explore more." And when the paddles arrived, we noticed that the letters were peeling off, and we were like, "This seems concerning. This is our first run of product. We already started getting orders." We were, panicking, and I contacted our supplier, and I was like, "Hey, the letters are peeling off. That feels not normal." And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." And so she ended up rushing. They realized that they had a manufacturing issue that they didn't catch, and so she rush shipped 150 of these little rubber loops to us. But we had to then send, because we already had orders, we wanted to keep up on delivery time. We had to send paddles as they were, and then I sent right after, probably like a day or so after, a handwritten letter that said, "Hey, like, this is Evan, co-founder of Canyon. I'm really sorry we had a manufacturing issue. I wanted to make sure you got the paddle in your hand, but here is a replacement rubber loop. Here's some stickers as well." And, I wanted to just kind of like correct that situation. So it was an area that I was terrified. Honestly, I think
Yeah.
from a consumer standpoint, they probably didn't see it as much of a big deal. They were like, "Oh, okay, sure." Like, they're working with me. But I was terrified because this was my first physical product, and it already had an issue. So that was pretty
Did you
scary.
get any response from the customers from that, or
I actually didn't get any responses
okay,
from, them being appreciative of it. I think at the time, it was probably like not as many orders that you know
right?
that I needed to worry too much about. But yeah,
Yeah, that's
so,
great.
yeah,
What's been maybe not as hard as you thought? Like you thought, hey, trying to figure this out or do this would be really hard, and I feel like we've done a decent job at it.
I would say the website.
Mm.
I would say the website. Now with today's website builders, it's very easy to create a very legit looking website and a very functional website. You're able to get really creative with a lot of features. We're actually still using the free version of a theme on Shopify,
Huh.
which is funny. And we actually are looking to upgrade our theme soon. Granted, some of the things that we have done on our website have been custom coded that we have
Mm.
learned from YouTube videos, from Reddit, that kind of stuff. But the website, I had no concept of what that would look like or how we would be able to make it functional. But yeah, I would say just going through tutorials and things like that, and we're able to create a really legit looking website that makes us seem very professional.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I had no concept of.
Yeah, that's funny. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, this is like e-commerce online. People buy them
Mm-hmm.
online, can get online, but it's a physical product that you got to ship out. So
Mm-hmm.
you're, the glory days of the startups in the garage. That's you right now.
That is me.
So
Yeah.
it's easy to look back at these days as nostalgia, but what is it actually like to run a brand new company out of your garage?
Yeah, it's funny because it is like the classic, startup in your garage, and I've got packaging material and I've got the paddles everywhere. I would say honestly, I some of my like favorite moments of the company have been just in the garage and like printing out product and being able to handle the product. I've said this in a video on my Instagram, but for me, I know that one day we're not going to be at a position where I can handle the amount of orders, and we're going to have to use a third party. Right now, I really enjoy being able to touch the product. I love being able to have the connection of like seeing the name of the person that I'm sending it to, and I'm like, Julie's getting this paddle in a couple of days, and that's a very cool feeling, a very cool connection to have with your customer. It's very intimate, right? Being able to have the product, touch the product. So I'm going to be sad, to be honest with you. We are getting close to that point where we are going to have to start moving out of my garage. And so, yeah, I've really been enjoying it. I would say the hardest part is just trying to keep the garage in a like organized fashion, because again, with a toddler running around, there's
Yeah.
always toys and things ended up in there. But it's what makes it fun, right?
Are you best friends with your delivery drivers?
Oh yeah, I mean it's so
Yeah.
funny. I tell my wife all the time, the only person or the only people who know how well the business is doing and how it's growing is my partner, my wife, and the USPS workers, because they see me there more and more and more, and they're like, "Wow, you've got more packages today. You've got more
Yeah.
packages today," and it continues to show. So And that's a big piece as well. Is I'm always super friendly with them and trying to build that connection because it's fun. Like I get to see
Yeah.
these same people almost every day.
Yeah. 9, 10 months into this thing, what is the biggest mistake you've made so far?
The biggest mistake we have made was probably, and this kind of goes to an earlier point, but the biggest mistake we've made was probably not try to be a little more timely with working with some outsourcing partners. And by that I mean we had some people that we worked with when we were designing the product and then manufacturing, and we probably could have expedited the process a little more, which kind of pushed back our timeline. We were originally trying to go live in May, but we couldn't until July because we had some hiccups with some designs. We had some hiccups with some people we were working with. And so I think keeping that schedule, I think we were maybe a little lax, which ultimately kind of slowed down our summer sales. We really wanted to get in at May. School was finishing. We wanted to be able to have a good push going into the summer as opposed to starting in July and then going from there. So I would say that probably limited a little bit of the growth right off the bat.
Yeah. Let's say it's been about a year. Last fall, you're getting ready to gear this thing up. How would Evan of last fall, be thinking of how things have gone if you could go back 12 months and tell him, here's how the next 12 months are going to go?
Honestly, I think Evan of last fall would have thought this Evan was crazy to try to start a pickleball company. Because the idea didn't even come until around December. So Evan of last fall would have been like, what are you even thinking about? But I would say just in general, though, I mean, I think I'm very impressed with like ourselves, me and my co-founder, how we've been able to take this thing and really be thoughtful and methodical about the growth and ultimately just dive head into something that we had no experience in, right? We are marketers, but we have never built a brand. We have never done this. And it's terrifying. It's scary. And like, I don't know if I could have done my first full business venture without a partner. I would say that piece. I would say going at it completely alone sounds even more terrifying. We have been able to balance each other out really well. So I would say like that has been a massive piece of that. So I'm just really proud of us.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, this is kind of your first big venture in this area. How has it been like getting past the self doubt and like kind of the self, like, this isn't going to work out? How do you move past that to get this thing going?
Yeah, I would say it's a lot of, well, I like to say it's a lot of therapy. I have a lot of conversations with my therapist about it. But this has been something that because I had started working as a freelancer first, I kind of got some of those cobwebs shaken off of diving into something, full bore and really going into it from, I'm not, I don't know much about this environment. So I would say that area was a little scarier because I was coming directly from the corporate world into going freelance. Starting this business was almost like, well, it made sense, right? I had been a freelance marketer. Now I'm building my own brand. So to squash those doubts, though, again, I think it goes back to the community and the friends you have, the connections that you're making with people. Because if I didn't have, a network of people around me, I don't know if I would have been able to do this. I could building a business as much as it is a solo sport. Sometimes it really is a team sport as well, because when you have a bad day, which inevitably you will, guaranteed, multiple bad days, you need people around you to help lift you back up.
I'm curious if we could talk a little bit about kind of the resources, the network, all that it took to start a business. Obviously, it's not just I have an idea, I found a co-founder, we're doing it. You mentioned like a mastermind, even how you connect with your co-founder. So what's this journey been like? Like, what resources have been helpful?
Sure.
How'd you get here?
Sure. I would say for me, it was posting on LinkedIn is what started this process. My biggest network, I would say, is on LinkedIn. I've got like 1,500 followers. It's minimal, but it's where I've built most of my following because I was coming from the corporate world. When I started freelancing, I started posting on LinkedIn about my freelance journey, about leaving the corporate world and about going on my own. And in no way was to harp on the fact that if someone was in the corporate world, that was a bad decision. It was just, This is my decision. This is my experience. And I'm going to share it with you. And the more that I did that, I started to get more people reaching out to me saying they felt the same way, or they were really impressed with the situation, or wow, how are you doing this? And just hearing those kind of helped keep me going. So it started there. It started just being vulnerable of posting my story more and more on LinkedIn. That then turned into posting on my Instagram, and then that moved into creating my own website and that kind of stuff. And so throughout that whole process, it was just continuing to be vulnerable. And the more vulnerable I was about the situation, how scared I was every day of, I used to have a guaranteed paycheck and now I
Right.
don't. And that's terrifying. And the more I was vulnerable about that, I had more people reach out to me. And so that network continued to grow and get bigger and bigger. As far as resources go, I'm a big believer in coaching programs. I'm a big believer in mentorships. And so I joined marketing communities, I joined e-commerce communities to be able to, again, soak up as much information as I possibly could. And whether it led to connections that were going to, net out to something great, or if it was just going to be me soaking up information, just being around more like-minded people is ultimately what helped kind of keep me going.
Yeah. Any particular books that you've read or maybe social media follows that you've learned a lot from the last couple
Yeah,
of
it's
years?
Yeah, it's funny. I I am the type of person who I would love to be a book person. I would love to be. I try to be. I go on like a book craze where I'll read a book every couple weeks, and then I won't read for like a year. I'm a massive podcast listener, so
Okay.
podcast has been huge for me. I would say from a social following, I would say my biggest that I follow within podcasts. So I listen to Guy Raz and How I Built This, which is a great
Okay.
podcast showing about how people build businesses from the ground up. I would say I listen to quite a bit of quite a bit of like just like small business podcasts and things like that. And so, but for me, it's always just been asking people who are already founders or already doing freelance or entrepreneurs what they're listening to. So it's a mixture of all kinds of different books
Mm.
and podcasts and resources. But I would say for me, it's always been hearing stories where people have built something from the ground up. So I would
Yeah.
say How I Built This is like my favorite podcast that I've listened to.
Is there any chance someday in the future when Canyon Pickleball does great that you could find yourself on that podcast?
I don't know. It's funny because, and this is actually a piece that I haven't shared with you or really many people, but we actually see Canyon like kind of turning into more of a lifestyle outdoors brand.
Mm.
This is the long term goal for
Yeah.
Canyon. Is it ultimately pickleball being a subset of Canyon and having Canyon hiking, Canyon camping, right? Like other pieces of that. So that is something that we really see a bigger vision for Canyon. But yeah, to answer your question, I mean, I don't know. We'll see one day, but I hope we continue to grow the thing. That I feel confident that we can. So
Well, I was going to ask, if things go at least somewhat according to plan, 3 years from now, what are you hoping Canyon Pickleball looks like?
I I hope that Canyon Pickleball community continues to just look like a very welcoming place.
Mm.
That is what I ultimately want. Is the Canyon community right now? It's a very inclusive community. It's a very welcoming community. I like to say that pickleball is for every body, and I mean body as in like the emphasis.
Yeah.
No matter what your age, race, gender, ethnicity, whatever it is, you can get into pickleball at a very reasonable price. It's much more accessible. There's no other sport that democratizes um, the playing field, right? I've played against a 75-year-old person with a prosthetic leg. I've played against a 12-year-old kid. I've played against an 85-year-old, and it is always a competitive game. It's always
Mm.
fun. It's always a blast. And so I just hope that community that we're building is still really strong, and that is still again the core piece of why we're doing this, which is to get people active, get people into their communities, being able to network with people and hang out with people they would have never had a chance to meet in their lives if it
Yeah.
wasn't for on the pickleball court.
I know there's a lot of different things you have to do, especially in the beginning. Find yourself doing a lot of stuff that maybe as it grows, you might be able to outsource, hire some help. But in all the things that you're doing, like what is your favorite thing that you get to do, and maybe that you are surprised that you enjoy so much?
It's, I would say, I would say the social media. I would say the content side. It's a love-hate relationship. You
Yeah.
know, I love doing it, but I also just sometimes dread thinking about new content ideas. Even though we are outsourcing some of the content creation, I still control messaging with people, responding to messages, comments, DMs, that kind of stuff. And so I really love that piece. I love being able to see people message us. I love being able to see people comment on our posts and me be able to reply to those. I also try to make a point to find, if I can, a follower that has purchased from us and then send them a direct message saying like, hey, it's Evan. I'm a co-founder of Canyon. Just wanted to say thank you for your purchase, because I love having that connection to them. I know when I receive those types of interactions from founders, it is really, really cool. No matter how big the brand is, you're just like, this is a really cool touch point, and you don't get that much in society today. I feel like we don't get as much human, connection with people. So the more that I can be involved in that, the better. Obviously, as Canyon continues to grow, it's going to be tougher, but I want to try to keep some semblance of that connection for sure moving
Yeah.
forward.
If you had to start this thing over from scratch, which has been only less than a year, but what
Mm-hmm.
would you do differently if you had to start over?
If I had to start over, I would I would probably start outsourcing things a little faster.
Hmm.
There are areas that we spent probably way too much time on that we didn't need to. Again, when we were trying to build our website, for instance, we were learning how to code via YouTube and Reddit. We were grabbing code, we were copying and pasting. We could have gone on to Fiverr or Upwork, and we could have found someone to be able to do that probably for $50. We could have expedited that as opposed to spending 4 hours in a day learning how to change a drop down on our website that we didn't have access to in our free template. Right? There was these pieces that really took up a lot of time, and while it was fun to build certain areas, I think we could have scaled quicker. And I think we could have really gone to market faster in a way that we just weren't able to because we spent more time on other things. So I would say knowing what you're good at, knowing what you want to learn, and then outsourcing the rest. Right.
Hmm.
And there was pieces that, the social piece I knew, but I wanted to learn more of. I was excited about that. My co-founder, he knew about Facebook ads, but he wanted to learn about that. So he took on that. But then other pieces we tried to learn together, and we had no experience in it. And we honestly should have started outsourcing it because it would have saved a lot more stress and a lot more headache.
Hmm. I'm curious, and maybe this is some of that answer. You've gone from being a part of these, message boards, marketing network things, trying to learn, to now someone who's done it.
Yeah.
If someone else, and I know it's dependent on industry and what they want to do, but maybe general
Mm-hmm.
principles, someone else is thinking of taking a step to start the thing. What are a couple of pieces of advice you'd give them?
I would say I would say one of the pieces of advice is there's never going to be the perfect time. There's never going to be the perfect time to start anything. And I've learned that from leaving paternity leave and having a 3-month-old, and having her full time until she started in daycare about a month and a half after that. There's never going to be the perfect time. There's always going to be some reason. Your brain does a really great thing of trying to, give you reasons why something shouldn't succeed. And it's really hard to go against that. But what I have learned in just the short amount of time, in a year and 8 months of leaving the corporate world, is there's never going to be the perfect time to start that idea, to give it a shot, to try it out. Do I recommend you leaving your job and just going full into it like I did and having no paycheck? Probably not. But I think that's one of the biggest pieces is take that first step and just try it, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, right? If it's to start a business, if it's to go freelance, if it's to, do something on the side, just take that first step and try it. My therapist always told me, whenever you're trying to do something, do it for 5 minutes. And if you still want to do it longer than that, then do it for another 5 minutes. Then do it for another 5 minutes. And I think that principle is still true within starting your own business or your own side project, is take that first step, see how it feels. Feels good? Okay, try the next thing. Try the next thing.
Yeah.
Just go to the next step. But I think that where people get stuck is you try to boil the ocean, and I hate that phrase, but it's cliche, but it's true. You try to boil the ocean, and you try to do everything at once. But
Yeah.
just take that first step, and then see what happens.
So starting a business is publicly vulnerable. I mean, friends,
Mm-hmm.
family, coworkers, they see you leaving this thing
Yeah.
and starting this thing. I'm curious if you had what the comments were like. Did anyone say anything unhelpful? What was it like when you kind of took this step? What people say?
Uh, yeah, this is a big, big piece of my. I'm like smiling so much because this is a big piece of my LinkedIn post. This is a big piece of Instagram. I was terrified. I still am scared to be able to post myself and to share my face. But what I will say is the idea of posting was so much scarier than actually posting. Once I started posting, and when you really are authentic and you're just yourself, it is so well received. It is so well received. I probably 99% of the comments and DMs and reach outs that I get from people have been overwhelmingly positive, overwhelmingly positive. I've had maybe one or two people that were kind of outlier friends anyways, and they had said things that were like, oh, like, what are you doing? Like, this is so goofy, blah, blah, blah. And what I would say was probably one of the hardest pieces was for me to kind of think that this is something that I could do. Like it was always this idea of like, oh, that was for them, right? That was, I couldn't build this. Like that's something they could do. That's something that person could do. Like I could never. And so one of the things that I did, and this is actually goes back to another tip that I would probably provide is I wrote down, I still have it on my phone. And actually I have it on my computer right now. I wrote down on Post-it notes everywhere all over my house, this phrase, why not you? And I wrote this down and I had it everywhere. And that became my mantra since I left the corporate world was why not me? Like, why not me be able to build something incredible? Like, why not me be able to have the life that I want with my daughter? Why not me? So when I started to embrace that and I started to post more about that, yeah, it was just overwhelming the support. And now it's been so much easier.
Yeah. A question that I think is helpful to ask is a lot of times we're worried about what will people think if we go for it, if we try this thing. And I found it helpful to individualize that. So not just like the collective people, but what will John actually think or Sarah actually think? And it's like, oh, well, that individual person, like not really worried about any individual person.
Yep.
And so, and all they are is the collection of individual people.
Yep.
So I found that personally very helpful with some of the things that I've done, try to do is like, you know what? I don't know what they would think, but I don't really care what they would think, this individual. And so it kind of takes the scariness of it.
Yeah, that's great. I like that a lot.
I'm curious too. I mean, obviously you started this, talk about your family, you're married, you have a kid. What's that been like for your marriage? I mean, how has that been, obviously like founding a company, my situation, people know me, like starting a church, being a pastor, like your wife's response is a really big part of what's going on. So how do you like cultivate like the marriage being strong and you guys being good in a hectic season of starting something that you might have no idea what it's going to look like a year from now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd be lying if I didn't say it's been hard. When my wife and I got married, in her vows, actually, one of the things she said was, I promise to always support all of your ideas, all of your dreams. And it's so funny because that was literally in our wedding video. And I always joke, I'm always like, yeah, but look, you said it in the vows. No, she has been my rock through this whole thing, and she has been so supportive. And I would say that is an area that I am just extremely, extremely fortunate to have a partner who has been so supportive from the beginning. Now, I'd be lying if I didn't say that there's been hard times with, knowing that I don't have a consistent paycheck. There's months that I made more than I ever made while working in a corporate job. And then there's months that I made less than I made when I was working minimum wage. So it is very, very hard to balance that. It's very hard to be, like continuing to go forward with that thought. What I would say has been like the biggest piece for us has just been as open and honest as possible. And prior to moving, we had a lot of tough conversations when we moved from Colorado to Florida. And so we have just continued to just keep the dialogue open, knowing that things can change, right? Like when I was freelancing, it was very possible that I was going to go back to the corporate world because I was struggling for the first couple of months and I was scared. I was in a position where I thought I was going to go back. But she kept reminding me that I was not happy with that. I was not, in a good headspace with all of that. And ultimately our marriage has never been stronger once I left the corporate world. I would say we were not going down like a bad path, but it was definitely a situation where, if that continued for years and years, who knows what would have happened, right? Because we have now been more connected than ever because now we're able to just spend more time together, and it's just been great. So I think keeping that dialogue open has been huge.
I'm curious what you miss maybe most about the corporate world. Obviously, a steady paycheck is one of it.
Yeah.
But there's pros and cons and everything. So what's something you miss about where you came from?
Yeah, aside from like the steady paychecks, which is great, I would say what I miss the most is being able to have a more dedicated team that you work with, right? You know, I have my co-founder who I speak with for like 3-4 hours a day. We have become best friends very quickly. But aside from that, you know, I don't have a team, right? I have freelancers we work with, but I don't have someone that I can just, you know, go see in the office, or, you
Yeah.
know, we fly into town for a company event, and we all get together, right? I don't have that. So I would say that's definitely an area that I miss. An area that I also really miss is probably traveling. I haven't traveled as much, mainly because I just haven't had a need to travel.
Yeah.
Eventually, we do want to start doing more conferences and trade shows and that kind of stuff. But I used to travel quite a bit for work. I used to go to a lot of different offices. I used to go for meetups and stuff. So I would say that personal connection is what I miss the most. But again, I think there's areas that I can start to do that more and more as Canyon starts to grow. But yeah, I would say I miss those.
Now you and your co-founder, different states,
Mm-hmm.
which I would imagine over time, as the kind of the business you got the kinks worked out, is not as big of a deal as the beginning when you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure out all these things and stay on the same page. How do you do that when you are not in near proximity to each other?
Yeah, luckily we're in the same time zone, so that has been the
Yes.
biggest piece. If we were not in the same
Mm.
time zone, it would be much harder. Luckily, when we do move back to Colorado, we've already built out a great foundation, and so we're in a good spot to be different time zones. So that's number one.
Yeah.
But it has been hard. It has been very challenging. I would say, you know, from a content standpoint, that's been one of the hardest pieces because I would love to film content with him. I would love to be able to
Yeah.
bounce ideas off him easier if we were in person. So that's definitely been tough. But again, I think it comes down to just being as open and communicative as you can with someone you're working with, you know, in business with. We were also business partners first, and then we
Mm.
became friends after. And I think that was a big piece. Like we connected on a lot of ways, but we also connected on building a business, and now we've become really good friends.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, knowing that like we knew we could work together in business, then that made us better friends.
Yeah.
So I think just being open and communicative about that has been just great. But yeah, it's, you know, it's been easier than I expected it to be, being, you know, 1,000 miles away, or, you know, however far New York is from Florida.
Yeah. Now, maybe this is a little bit more of a personal question, Evan, but you mentioned you moved from Colorado to Florida and then
Mhm.
potentially moving back. So what led you from Colorado to Florida into Orlando, and now you're already you're saying eventually you want to go back to Colorado?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So we are just much more mountain people.
Okay.
That has kind of always been our vibe. We love the camping, the hiking, the snowboarding, and so when we moved to Florida to get basically a community around us to
Mm-hmm.
help with Asa. That's our daughter, and we really wanted to be able to be close to family. We wanted to be
Yeah.
able to you know be around them, and we always kind of knew we would get back to Colorado, but we weren't really sure, you know, when. And so Florida's been great. It's been an amazing experience being around friends and family. But yeah, we're very excited to get back to the mountains. It's just, you know, we're has always felt very connected for us.
Yeah. And as we're recording this, you have a hurricane coming, so you don't
We
get
do,
those in Colorado. So
we do. Yeah, I know. It's actively brewing behind me.
yeah, I see the rain coming in.
Yeah,
Um, put you on the spot a little bit. What's a question
sure.
that nobody asks you about Canyon Pickleball that you wish people would ask you?
That's a great question. I would say, um, man, that's a really great question.
Or put another
Yeah,
way,
I know. I'm
what's
trying to
something
think.
that you just love about Canyon Pickleball you want people to know?
I would say what I what I really want people to know about Canyon, and really just about pickleball in general, is it's more than a sport, and it is a I compare it to if you get into like a running community, or if
Mm,
you get into like a hiking community, or whatever kind of community that you're a part of. It is very very different than other sports, and pickleball has always been just like this like kind of shining light for me. It's what got me out of a very dark place when I moved from Colorado to Florida. I knew not many people when I moved here. It's what really created a friend group for me. It created
mm.
you know, something for me to get active and for me to feel like, you know, I was, you know, really being a part of my community. So for me, Canyon and pickleball is just, it's a really really special place, and I want people to feel welcome. And
Yeah.
that's always been like the biggest piece with Canyon. So
Yeah. Now, I would be remiss to not ask, practically speaking, about pickleball.
Mhm.
I'm somebody, well, use me as an example. Played
Sure,
pickleball a handful of times, know how it
sure.
works. What is like one or two tactical things I should keep in mind the next time I step out onto the court that will make me better?
That's a great question. It's a great question. I would say the biggest thing, one of the biggest things is patience almost always wins in pickleball.
Hmm.
Almost always wins. It is a very different thing than you think of tennis, you think of racquetball. You're kind of like always kind of playing offense. Some of the best pickleball players are playing not to lose, they're not
Hmm.
playing to win. And when you play not to lose, you'll be able to set yourself up to win. So, when you're on the court, when you're dinking, when you're having rallies, it's about being patient. It's about finding the right opportunity to strike. And honestly, this is going to sound cliche, but it's very similar within business. And what I've realized in building
Hmm.
Canyon is the same thing. It's like being patient, and then when the opportunity presents itself, hit. Right. That's exactly the same thing in pickleball. A lot of early pickleball players, you're trying for the big drive, the big shot. You're trying to do so much, and
Yeah.
you don't need to do that, right? You be patient, and then when you find a great opportunity, you strike.
Evan, if I was looking for, let's say, a pickleball paddle from a company that's sustainable, has a great mission, and has great products, where should I go?
I think you should go to Canyon Pickleball. We are very excited right now. We have 3 designs. We are coming out with more designs, so we're very very excited. Yeah, you should definitely check out Canyon Pickleball, and you can see what we're all about.
So speaking of checking it out, let us know your website, your socials, just personally as well, but also, because you guys are talking about pickleball, also doing
Mhm.
behind the scenes of the business. So where can people find you guys online?
Yeah, so you can find us at Canyon Pickleball for all of our socials. You can go on Instagram, TikTok. That's where we're mostly posting is Instagram and TikTok. So you can follow us on there. Check us out at canyonpickleball.com. Very easy to remember, very easy to say.
Yeah,
So you can check us all out there, and yeah, see what the community is all about, and we'd love to have you.
that's great. We'll put all links to all that in the show notes as well. So be sure to go down there if you want to get more to know about Evan and Canyon Pickleball. Evan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, sharing us for your journey, and I wish the best of luck for you as you guys continue in the future.
Dylan, thank you so much. Yeah, it's been great being here and chatting with your audience.